Hey, what's up? This is Kevin from Kevin's BBQ Joints, and I am so excited to bring you my interview with Erin Smith Feges from Feges BBQ in Houston, Texas. This was recorded March 12th, 2020. COVID-19 was just starting to creep into our consciousness. They had not shut down their Greenway Plaza location yet, so we do discuss COVID a little bit and how they're changing things, and you could already see the wheels turning on what she was thinking of what they should do about it. But it's kind of a nice way to look back and see kind of what the mindset was at that time. But mostly I just wanted to talk to her about her life and her journey to meeting Patrick, and then from there them opening up Feges. And then specifically, I had actually really wanted to talk to her about their second location, which was scheduled to open in February, March of 2021. That might change now. That's in Spring Branch. That location is where they'll be having a Saturday pop-up where you can order online ahead of time for pickup at that location. That'll be every Saturday. And there's kind of breaking news. As I was finishing editing this, I was communicating with her to see if there's anything new. And at their Greenway Plaza location, Tuesday through Friday, they'll be having dinner pickup where you'll be able to order online for dinner pickup between 3 to 6. And they'll have a specific curbside location to pick up. So that's really cool. That's exciting that that's going to be back up. So Tuesday through Friday, they'll be at Greenway. And then Saturday, they'll be at the Spring Branch location. And so I don't want to get too into this because the story is great. It's a journey that took her to working at Thomas Keller's Per Se in New York, to working at Italian wine merchants, and then Babbo. And we talk about that situation a little bit and the whole fallout with the Mario Batali and the other guys at Babbo. So that's super interesting. And then we get to how she met Patrick, how she came back to Houston and what she did there, and then how she met Patrick, and how together they started Feges, and then their dreams for the second location. So it gets very in depth and it's super interesting. I know you're going to love it. It put a smile on my face editing it, and I think it'll put a smile on yours too during this time. I hope you guys are all staying safe. And the Kevin's BBQ Joints podcast and YouTube channel is sponsored by Treaty Oak Distilling in Dripping Springs, Texas. You can check them out at treatyoak.com. They still have a lot going on. They still have their whiskey. They still have their gin, but they also have a grocery on location. I'll be talking to Scott Fogel over there at Treaty Oak later this week, so check back for that interview. That'll be a cool one. But again, treatyoak.com, and also AJ's Custom Cookers. It's AJ Ramirez. It's ajscustomcookers.com. As the name says, custom cookers. He can do anything. Lots of live fire stuff right now, so check out all of his work at ajscustomcookers.com. And if you're digging these, please subscribe. That way you don't miss out. I have a website at kevinsbbqjoints.com. Tons of content, all these interviews, additional photo essays, and just a lot of cool stuff. But at the end, thanks so much for listening. I so appreciate it. How are you guys doing with how has business, because I might as well address the elephant in the room, how has this COVID-19 affected your business?
So not much yet, but the big unknown is, we work in an office complex. So you could argue probably 98% of our business is office workers. So if there is any chance that, businesses decide in the Houston area to issue work from home or encourage their employees to, stay out of the office setting, that will dramatically impact our business. And there's no doubt about it. So we're brainstorming things we can do. We want to get ahead of it. People will still eat, right? I mean,
without a doubt,
coronavirus or not, the one thing we all have to do every day is consume energy. So we're trying to think of ways we can mobilize. If nobody's going to come to us, how do we get our food to them? And
that's a smart idea.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not something that we would want to be part of our regular business model, but that's kind of where the future of food is going anyways. And it's hard for barbecue to adapt because what we do is so, it's all about the line, and it's all about, we run out of things. So, updating an online system constantly so that people know what's available in real time is a lot of time and energy. But I think in an instant like this, we'd be very willing to embrace the technology and mobilize our staff so that we can keep everybody on payroll and keep paying people and, keep our business going so that we can survive until this is over.
Yeah, perhaps it's maybe like an order a day in advance kind of thing, so that way you guys cook the proper amount for those specific orders. It's a challenge. And I've heard a lot of people talk too about like how this is going to shape delivery in general, and then there's the issue of people being make sure it's safe for the people delivering and make sure it's safe for.
I think the idea in my head is you take the human interaction out of it. So it's paid online, so there's no cash transaction or anything like that. So you're not, you eliminate that transaction. And then it could be just delivery where you drop it off at the door, ring the doorbell, send a text message, something like that, where
no,
you're
that's
not
smart. Yeah.
really in contact.
What a weird world. And I keep thinking, like I was thinking yesterday, that life is going to be like pre-COVID-19 and then post. It's like, and it's not that it's going to be everyone's going to be gone or something, but it's necessarily like just the way we deal with everything, airports, everything.
Yeah. I think the way our generation, or at least my generation, has not really experienced any kind of major hardship like this. And so I think that there will certainly be a shift in the way we think and the way we operate, which I think there will be a lot of benefit to it in the long run. It's about being smart about how you prepare for it now. So obviously, we're not panicking, but we want to be prepared for different scenarios that could take place so that we can make sure our business survives.
Wow, that's interesting. It's like, it's like World War II or something. How people had to ration and give up different things. It's interesting. And in the end, we all like. It seems like this generation too is like trying to figure out things in general, like to work hard and try to figure out their niche in life. And so this is like another aspect of evolving, and that's crazy. Well, you grew up in Texas, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Houston.
Did you always have a passion for food as a child, like for cooking? Was that something that you did with your family or grandmother? Or?
I was a really picky child, like obnoxiously picky. My parents still make fun of me because now I'm kind of forcing them to eat things that they're like, why am I eating, cow brains? And I'm like, because it's so good. Eat this tongue. This tongue is amazing. And they just like shake their heads because they're like, we couldn't get you to eat chicken or anything green. So I was very food averse for most of my life. And then I don't know, I went to college and started cooking with my roommates. I mean, just like easy, we'd make chili on Sunday nights and invite all of our friends over. And I really enjoyed it. And I also figured out that I was kind of good at it without having, any training or, any kind of background in it. And I'd never really thought of cooking as a profession. Now that seems weird to me, but I didn't know any chefs. The Food Network was just becoming a thing where, you could name 5 chefs because you saw them on TV. Yeah. So it was kind of just becoming this field where I felt like, oh, that is a profession. Obviously it's existed forever, but my awareness of it was so limited back then.
For all of us.
Yeah. And I loved cooking, and I went and studied abroad in Spain. I came back and I was actually supposed to take a big test to go to dental school. And that's when I just kind of announced to my family, like, hey, so I know I graduate in a few months and I have all these big plans, but they're changing. So here's what I'm going to do instead. And I think my dad was a little shocked because not that he cared much if I was a dentist or not, but he was like, well, there's all this stability in this one field.
Exactly. No,
and then there's no stability in this other field. Are you sure you want to do it? And I was like, yes.
Did you want to be a dentist? Is that what you were going to be?
No, I really wanted to be a doctor.
Oh, a doctor. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to be a doctor. I started to become concerned that I wouldn't get into medical school. And so that kind of steered me towards dental school, where you study everything. Undergrad is the same. Like you take all the same prerequisite courses for biology and chemistry and genetics and physics. And so the prerequisites were identical. But I just felt like my odds were better for dental school. But then I threw it all away and was like, I'm going to be a chef.
Could you imagine your life as a dentist?
Not at all. Not at all.
It's a specific profession, like a certain mindset. Every dentist that I've met has that same mindset, and it's having your hands in people's mouth is a lot. It's a big deal. it's different.
Yeah. I honestly don't even really understand why I chose it, because I would have loved being a doctor. There's like chaos, and I really am drawn to biology, which is I think why food works well, because it's all biology and chemistry really at the end of the day anyways. But I was really drawn to that field, and so being a doctor made a lot of sense because I liked the idea of helping people. Settling on dentistry I look back on it and I'm like, I have no idea what I was thinking. It was probably just the easy.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that didn't play out.
No, I'm glad too. I'm so glad. No, a lot of us are. Many of us are. I'm sure. Right? But then, and you probably wouldn't have met Patrick, right? If you had gone that route.
I doubt it. Patrick actually didn't start going to a dentist regularly until we met.
Well,
So
see,
it's
that's
unlikely
good. So there's
we would
that.
have gotten together.
Wow. So what culinary school were you inspired by that? Or was
Yeah.
that a challenge that was a thing you had to, you want in your mind you had to go through to go to a restaurant?
Well, so I graduated from college in December and then started culinary school in January.
Oh, wow.
And so there was, only like a short transition. And culinary school starts with a very basic chemistry class. Like here's acids and bases, and here's what happens when you add salt, and here's what happens when you add acid. And that was all very very straightforward for me. So I did really well. I mean, I actually graduated culinary school at the top of my class without having any culinary experience to bring into it. A lot of the people in my class had worked in restaurants in the past and they just wanted to, get a degree and make it real. Mm-hmm. And I had none, and I graduated at the top of my class. And I think that frustrated a lot of people, but it was because the academic side of it was second nature to me. Mm. And in a lot of ways, like kitchens are kind of like labs, everything's got to be clean and sanitized and wiped down. And you're supposed to wear white coats, although now everybody just wears whatever they want in a kitchen. But, it has kind of lab setting. So, it felt like an extension of what I'd just been studying.
Interesting. Well, then, did you go directly from culinary school to working with Thomas Keller?
Yes. So
That is kind of nuts.
It's super, super nuts. And I didn't have a lot of restaurant experience before culinary school. I had never worked in a kitchen before culinary school. And then the last 3 months of culinary school, you do an internship. They call it an externship in school, where you go work in a restaurant. Some of it's paid, some of it's unpaid. It just depends on where you want to go. And, I went to school in San Francisco. So, I started looking around and I just felt like if I'm going to do this, I want to go somewhere really great. And I saw that, so the French Laundry didn't have any availability, okay, but Per Se did. And my sister was living in New York at the time. So I remember applying for the internship, which was really hard to get. The criteria was lengthier than any of the other options. And within 24 hours, I got a call back saying, when can you start? Which was, I was certain I wasn't going to ever hear from them. Wow. So that worked out really well. But when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing in a kitchen, like I didn't know to say behind, the things that they call, containers, everything has a name. And now now I know all of that. But I just remember on the first day, somebody told me to go grab, can you grab a six pan? And I remember walking into the room where all the equipment was and just looking around and being like, oh, none of it's labeled. I wonder what a six pan is. And I mean, I definitely think I looked like a fool for a couple of days.
How long had Per Se been open at that time?
It was three years open. It was 3 years old.
Was he present when you first started, like the first week or two, or is that something? Or there's a head chef at Per Se too, right?
Yeah. So the chef de cuisine at the time, his name is Jonathan Benno. Oh yeah. And Thomas Keller, he was definitely not there every day, and he was actually working on his Under Pressure cookbook. At the time, cooking under vacuum and sous vide, all of that was kind of like a whole new method. And he was really the pioneer of using that on a regular basis in his kitchens. And so the book he was writing, Under Pressure, was a great tool. I think now people take that cooking method for granted because everybody knows how to do it. And, kitchens across America utilize it. But at the time it was like...
sells like a home version of it probably.
Yeah, I mean, you can buy a machine for like $25 now. But at the time, everything was very revolutionary. And so he was writing this cookbook. So he was there working on a side project. They did a lot of the photography in the kitchen at Per Se. Oh. So I actually saw him, and because I was an intern and I wasn't as involved in dinner service, I actually got called on to help him do some things from time to time for the book that he was writing. Okay. Just like watch this thing, and when it gets to 150 degrees, come let me know. And I would literally just sit there and like stare at a machine until it got to 150.
Oh,
things like that. Somebody you weren't paying to do.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and also too, don't they have Am I right? Do they have like a TV, a screen that shows like from French Laundry to Per Se? Is that something? I've always heard that they have something that they can communicate the kitchens or something, or he can see what's happening.
When it was first explained to me, it was so that Thomas Keller could keep an eye on, no matter where he was, he could keep an eye on both kitchens. In reality, when working, you almost forget it's there. New Year's Eve, like LA would toast, or Babbo would toast New York, vice versa.
So at New Year's was like the only time that you really noticed that there was TVs there. Are there things that you do today that you took from that experience, and did that experience that helped you get other jobs, obviously because it's on your resume, but also do you feel like that gave you a certain confidence too, or
all of the above? I mean, the first couple weeks I was there, I was so overwhelmed, underprepared, like physically and mentally, and I didn't know what it meant to be a professional in the kitchen yet. And so that was my first experience. And I mean, there were days I would go home after a 14-hour day and my ankles were super swollen. My back was killing me because my body had not adapted. Sure. And over time, all of that stuff got better, you know, but it just was, I felt like every day I was the worst person in the kitchen. And that was a horrible feeling. And I just remember wanting to quit and then remembering like, it's only 3 months. You can do anything for 3 months, right?
For sure.
You can survive anything for 3 months. Just suck it up. And I did. And after, you know, I think it took about 2 weeks for me to get, you know, a feel for being in the kitchen and to start to know the chefs that I was working for. And they started to respect me a little bit more in terms of, they were always very respectful, but they started giving me more responsibility. And I was obviously getting better at what I was doing. And by the end of it, I didn't want to leave. I mean, I wasn't making any money. Yeah. And I was living in the most expensive city in the United States. And I was like, please, let me stay. And they did. I stayed on a little bit longer, learned more. But it ended up being, I think, the best thing I ever did in my career. Not only did I learn a lot about professionalism, what it means to respect the field of being a chef, but and to respect equipment and product and your team. The recipes are obviously outstanding and everything's very precise. So I think it was kind of like a tenfold experience. I mean, if you don't walk out of that kitchen having learned something, then there's something wrong with you.
I think so.
Probably, you know, they don't let people like that in. But no, I mean, to this day, a lot of the lessons we try to teach our staff have a lot to do with what we learned or what I learned at Per Se, because it has everything to do with respecting the fact that you are a chef and you get to do this. And you get to work with product, so don't waste it. Don't, you know, it took somebody a long time to raise that cow. You know, don't make that all for nothing. You know, treat it well. The ethos of Thomas Keller, I think, is very unique, and probably the thing that I take the most away from that experience is the things that he taught. The few times that I did get to interact with him, he always left me with these like very powerful messages of, you know, what an opportunity it is we have, and don't squander that.
Wow. That's, if there's any takeaway from even this interview for people listening or watching, that's huge. And that's really important in general, especially nowadays, it's even more important. Wow. That's really, so at that point you had the bug, right? You wanted to, did you go to, I don't, in your path, when I've looked at before and researched you've worked at a number of different restaurants and groups. Did you work at a restaurant in New York right after that, or did you go somewhere else?
So I stayed in New York. The chef de cuisine at Per Se, his name was Jonathan Benno. His wife is a woman named Liz Benno, and she was also a chef, or is also a chef. And he said to me, you know, you are young and you're really good at what you're doing, but you need more experience. Like, you need to experience some kitchens that are not Per Se, because this is, you know, he quite frankly said, you won't see a lot of kitchens like this, and you need to go experience the dirty, rough ones. And so he, you know, set up an interview for me to work for her in a restaurant. At the time, it was like an event space at Italian Wine Merchants. Okay. And I went and worked there, and I was her sous chef. But the title of sous chef simply meant we had 3 employees, so it was Liz, the executive chef. It was I was the sous chef, and then there was another chef working for us named Ned, and because he had even less experience than me, I got to be sous chef.
Oh wow, that's cool. That's great.
Yeah. And it was great. I really enjoyed working with Liz. She came up through the Mario Batali background. So
Because was that part of the of Babbo and
yeah, so Italian wine merchants at the time had all the same ownership as
oh Joe
all.
was that Joe's right?
So Joe was part of it, Mario was part of it, and then they had a third partner whose name I can't remember, but he's the one that actually runs it now. I think Joe and Mario sold their part of it
Oh,
a
gotcha.
while
Okay.
ago. But yeah, and she was a fantastic chef. It was really, I think, important for me to work for a woman. I never understood how important it was until recently, but you learn a lot from somebody who's already navigated it and learned the hard way what to do, what not to do, how to survive. And so I really enjoyed working from her. She also has a very unique cooking style. She's way more relaxed with her cooking than Jonathan was. The per se style was very strict. Every recipe was done to the gram. Liz was just like, you throw in this, and her food always came out so beautiful and delicious. And I felt like it's kind of good to learn
Yeah, no,
both.
that's fantastic to have that.
Yeah. And then through that opportunity, I got a position at Babbo working on the line.
And how was that? Because that at the time, and that's that must have been interesting.
It's everything that you probably would imagine it to be.
Okay.
It was a really fun experience. It was during Babbo's heyday. It was a very popular restaurant. You
Yeah.
could get a reservation. I think the food that we put out of that kitchen was some of the best food I've ever cooked. But all the rumors and all the lawsuits, it's all true. I mean,
It wasn't a shock when all the stuff went down.
not at all. Not at all. In fact, I know some of the people that were the originators of the lawsuits. They worked at the same time I was there. I witnessed a lot of the stuff that they claim. In fact, everybody witnessed it. Nothing really ever happened behind closed doors. I think the ethos there was, this is how it is. So take it or leave it. And
How
if you leave
crazy
it,
is that too? Like
yeah,
it's like that's not really what our focus of our interview is, but it is amazing that stuff like that, and that's not
yeah,
unique just to Babbo, or that
yeah,
was 100 or 1,000 restaurants across the United States. That was things like
yeah.
I'm sure they had a certain and he had a certain power that other he was a celebrity chef and
Mario wasn't there very often. So the things that happened were the executive chef that was there, whose name I won't mention,
no
but you
no
could
no
really easily figure it out. He was who all the things that I witnessed, it was this one individual.
hmm
And it was just kind of allowed to happen. Now, later on, I saw that there were the lawsuits that came out directly naming Mario as the perpetrator. The things that I witnessed somebody else do were so identical to what
oh
Mario was
interesting okay
doing.
that's good that
So
thank you
it
for
kind
clarifying.
of lends itself to the fact that like these are learned behaviors
hmm
and they become acceptable because if you're not punished, then you don't stop. And so the person that I had an issue with and that I always felt like, that's who we saw on a daily basis treat people very poorly. Those were things that he learned to be acceptable from somebody else.
The environment was created and then it
Yeah.
just ran with it. Wow. And it's just weird too, like how, like, obviously a lot of things happened during these last couple of years when everything was going down, but it's just weird that Mario like doesn't exist in the food world at all and how he was a big part of the Food Network. And then
Yeah.
it just, I guess, just like this COVID thing, everything changes, life changes.
And it changed dramatically fast. Like I
hmm
feel like it just flipped a switch. And I think the kitchen environments were already starting to change. I moved back to Houston, and the kitchen environments in Houston that I experienced were just totally different. And I don't know if that's because of location or just the time. I was in Houston working in kitchens after I was in New York working in kitchens, but it certainly seemed like people were just kind of fed up with the overall, why does it have to always be so
Yeah.
negative and can't we enjoy what we do? And so I think it had a lot more to do with like creating a positive work environment. And then a lot of stuff just started to solve itself.
Yeah, and it seems like there's like you always hear about those terrible chefs, and I've worked in a couple of kitchens where the owners were just crazy, and it's like what, and then you work in one that's calm, but it's focused, and you're like, they
Yeah.
both, like, this actually works better and everyone's happy and no one's leaving. The turnover is not crazy. Yeah.
Common sense.
Common sense, yeah. Common sense doesn't always prevail, but it should. You would think it would. So how did you get yourself back to? Because I'm sure there's a long, long path, but
Yeah.
you got back. You eventually made your way back to Houston.
Yes. So actually, I came back to Houston after Babbo.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I actually was really kind of done with kitchens after Babbo. I left in November and decided I wanted to spend the holidays at home. So I didn't get another job right away. Came back to Houston, spent the holidays here, got back to New York. I started working as a culinary expert for Williams Sonoma because I mean, I was desperate to find a job that didn't put me in a restaurant. And so I spent a year in New York as a culinary expert. And I don't know, I think it was like my fourth winter there. And it was February and it'd been like 7 degrees for over a month. And I was like, I think I'm done. I think I'm ready to go back home. Summers I was like a New Yorker or die. I was like, I'll never leave. And then winter I'd always start to, my confidence in being a New Yorker would be shattered. But I decided I wanted to come back to Houston. I had no idea how the culinary scene in Houston was going to be. I thought I was going to end up being a chef at a chain restaurant where we'd be really busy on Friday and Saturday, but we'd be dead throughout the week. I mean, I had all these notions of the dining scene because when I left Houston, I was in high school. I graduated high school and then I didn't live in Houston again until, 10 years later after living in San Francisco and New York and going to college in Lubbock. And so I had no idea what to expect. And I came back at the right time. It was 2010. Justin Yu was talking about opening a restaurant that became Oxart. Seth Siegel Gardner and Terrence Galvin were doing these food dinner pop-ups that had a name I don't remember. They were kind of like these underground pop-ups. You had to, you had to get this like cryptic email that had like this password, and then you could like put your name on a list, and then they'd send you a location and time later. I mean, it was just there was all these like cool food things.
Yeah, that's so much fun. They had a couple of those in LA too.
Yeah, and so I think the timing was perfect for when I came back, and I got into the food scene in Houston, working at a place called Plonk Bistro, which was very new and in a neighborhood that was not really a dining destination yet. And, it was a great step into the Houston culinary scene. Like I call it a scene, but at the time it was just like this growing little family of chefs that supported each other. And a lot of them had worked together at various restaurants in Houston, but a lot of them had also worked outside of the city in New York and in LA. And
when you got into that scene, were you thinking that you wanted to open a restaurant maybe someday? Like did it start to, or did you,
No.
because you had been involved with them so much, you're like, that's too much headache?
I used to tell people that when they'd say, do you want to open a restaurant? I'd say never. I never want to own a restaurant. I never want to own my own restaurant. Well, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll I'll write cookbooks. And again, I think a lot of this still had to do with like the bad taste in my mouth that I had from, working at Babbo. But restaurants are hard, not just owning a restaurant, but, the hours and the margins are terribly small, and every little change, every little coronavirus causes so much loss of sleep from stress, so much out of your control, oil prices in Houston going up and down, all of these things affect your business. And all you want to do is just serve food because it seems like this wholesome thing that everybody loves, but it's hard. And I always said I would never do it. And then I met Patrick.
I know. So I'm curious as to how that conversation went. Like when he said, like, I want to open a restaurant, but at that point you guys had been doing enough things. Like, so how did you meet him? I don't think when I talked to him originally, we didn't talk about how you guys met.
So my journey through Houston eventually led me to, helping Blacksmith, which is a coffee shop that at the time was owned by Chris Shepard, David Buer, Bobby Hugel, Kevin Floyd. There was this group of people, and they were all very, very influential, and they all came together on this one concept, and they hired me to do the food menu. And it was this great opportunity. It was this fun little, it was this small little breakfast menu, and it happened to be across the street from Underbelly where Patrick was working.
Okay.
And according to him, he had had a crush on me for a while, and so he developed a coffee habit so that he could
Oh, that's awesome.
accidentally run into me all the time. And and then after Blacksmith opened, they offered me a position as the culinary director for all of their concepts. And so I actually started working more regularly in Underbelly and Hay Merchant. So I was seeing Patrick on a daily basis in the kitchen, and we started dating. And he was doing barbecue, but he had just started doing barbecue pop-ups. So I would help him with that. And, he was working in a kitchen cooking, fine dining type of food, as fine dining as Underbelly was, at least. And we did a lot of cooking events together. We really enjoyed cooking together. Our styles were opposite. He was more rustic. He would just throw things on a plate, and I would bring in these like finishing touches and some finesse. And we felt like it was a really great combination together. The two things were
perfect,
very complementary. Yeah, when he would say I want to open a restaurant, it never really scared me, because I'd be like, okay, I can finally see myself wanting to do this.
And it sounds like what you're doing now, which is amazing. Like it was perfect. It was like kismet. It made sense.
Yeah, we really like our menu. I think it's reflective of both of us.
So then this was probably around what? When did you guys meet in 15, or was it?
No, we met in
13?
2013, yeah.
2013. Because you opened Feges in 2018. Did you do Chopped then in between that? Is that how?
So I did Chopped in 2015. I've done it twice now. The first time was in 2015, and I think it aired in 2016. But I remember filming it in 2015. It was right before the holidays, and I had no idea what to expect. I was the executive chef at a hotel at the time. And so my lifestyle was like I was working 15, 16 hours a day, wasn't watching TV, wasn't watching Chopped. When they asked me to do it, I actually didn't really want to do it. The hotel was like, you really need to do it. And then Patrick was like, why wouldn't you? And I said, well, what if I lose? I don't want to look stupid. What if I cry? And he was just like, there's a lot of what ifs in that. What if you win? And so I did it.
Is that filmed in Los Angeles or New York?
It's filmed in New York.
New York, okay.
Yeah, and it's one day of filming. Win or lose, it's one day of filming. You wake up really early in the morning, go to the kitchen, the studio, film all day. If you win, you're there until really late at night. And it was the most nerve-wracking day of my life.
Yeah, I was going to say the pressure, and how was that?
I mean, I just remember I kept thinking it would be totally okay if I lose right now. I'm just ready for this to be over. It was a gauntlet of tension is what I would call it. I mean, it's a really light, uphearted set, but you're so nervous. You have no idea what the judges are going to say. The whole situation takes longer, obviously, than what you see on the show.
For sure.
So the tense moments last forever.
Wow. And
you have to sit there, the cameras are on you. So you're kind of just like, you want to hold like your cold face, like I'm not smiling. I'm being intimidating right now. Like I'm going to win this. And I just remember my hands were behind my back and I was just holding them like this tight for all day. And the next day I remember waking up and my hands were so sore. I couldn't grasp anything
because. Oh my gosh. Okay. That makes sense.
My hands were just like done.
That's so wild.
When people are like, how was it? I was like, it was great. It was so awesome. I won. The second time I did it, which was 4 months after Wyatt was born, we filmed it in June. I remember telling Patrick before I went, because I knew I was like, it's been 4 years since I've done Chopped, and I haven't cooked that much since then. Like in a restaurant, I left the hotel and did wine stuff for a little while so that Patrick and I needed something more flexible so Patrick and I could focus on Feges BBQ. And so I stepped out of kitchens because kitchens are not flexible.
No.
And so when I filmed the second one, I was like, it's all previous champions. So, the talent pool is much greater. And then I'm, not cooking regularly anymore. I don't do food like that. We have a barbecue restaurant. Our sides are all made from scratch, but none of them are order fire. We're not sitting there. We don't do a lot of fine dining cooking anymore. So I was really nervous. And I just remember telling Patrick, I either want to be the first person out or the winner, because everything else is it's just a waste of your time. Like, you're in New York, but you're not loving New York. You're not getting to experience New York. And so when I left, I said, you better hope I'm either the first person out so that I get to go enjoy my whole day in New York, or that I win.
And that's interesting too. I love like your Instagram post about it, because you were very honest about, like, you wanted people to watch it even though you didn't win it, but also too there was a lot of things going on because your life had changed so much since the first time.
Yeah. It was, and I really did want to say no. I'd said no to them 4 or 5 times for doing a championship one, but a lot of it had to do with timing. Like, one time it was the week that Patrick and I were getting married, and I was like, oh, so I really can't do it. I'm getting married. And then the second time we were on our honeymoon, and then the third time we were about to open Feges BBQ. So I had these legitimate excuses, but the last time they asked, Patrick looked at me and he was like, ooh, no excuses anymore. Like,
You have to.
there's nothing going on right now. And I was like, what do you mean there's nothing going on? We just had a baby. I feel like that's a pretty legitimate excuse.
I would think so.
And then that kind of flipped on me, because my reason for not doing it became the reason I did it.
Oh, so that's really interesting. Was Patrick there for either of them?
No. And well, for one, they give you money to get there and to stay, but it's not very much. Yeah. So it barely covers one person. And I also, like, the first time I went, I was so, like, intensely focused. I didn't want anybody there. I didn't tell any of my New York friends. I mean, I have a gazillion friends in New York. I didn't tell anybody I was in town because I didn't want to go out the night before. I didn't want to be distracted.
That's
I wanted
smart.
to get this experience over with, be super focused. And then, if I lost, I was going to probably go get really wasted or something and, wake up the next day and fly home. But the second time I went recently, I knew the chances of winning were low. So I was way more like, let's just enjoy New York. Let's go to the park. Let's go make plans for restaurants. But Patrick wasn't with me because, unfortunately, somebody had to take care of Wyatt.
That's so interesting. And then you're the only person I've ever talked to that's been on Chopped, and so that's and I'm sure there's not a lot of people you talk to that have been on Chopped other than those people. So now with Feges, what was it like when you first opened? Were you guys nervous at the time? And then the location, I don't even know if Patrick I don't even know if you had opened yet. How did you find that location?
So we'd been looking for about a year. We'd found a few places that we'd really fallen in love with, and spent about, a couple weeks to a month starting negotiations. And for various reasons, those locations fell through. Either we discovered something that was like, okay, this will not work, or we just couldn't, agree on certain specific critical terms with the landlord, so we had to walk away. And throughout that process, a friend of ours, David Buer, who the connection is, he was one of the owners at Blacksmith Coffee Shop. His business empire started in the Greenway office complex. Oh, and he'd been kind of urging us to consider this food court. And eventually they reached out to us, and it was kind of right at this pivotal moment where we just had to walk away from a place that we were really emotionally attached to. We'd already envisioned our business there, and we decided to take the meeting with Greenway, and we put the numbers together, and we were like, this business model seems great. The risk is lower, the costs are lower. The one thing that was really important to us was we wanted to be able to cook everything on site, which meant they were going to have to help us get a smoker into the building and ventilate it, as far as it was going to need to go. And we knew that would be cost prohibitive for us, and they agreed to help. And so we do everything on site in a 1,400 square foot, food court kitchen space.
Does it make you proud that people come to you guys just for sides, or the sides are just as important as the proteins?
It makes me really proud. And it makes me happy as a consumer that people feel like they can come to a barbecue restaurant and not order barbecue. Yeah. And also, we're really aware of our location. We're in an office complex. We see the same people 4, sometimes 5 times a week. And we wanted to give people variety. So we wanted to have a big enough menu that, you could pick and choose and not eat the same thing every day. But we also wanted people to be able to eat healthy, because it's easy to eat an unhealthy barbecue meal, once a week or once a month. But if you think you're going to eat there 3 times a week, you kind of have to think about your meal differently.
For sure.
And so key to our success in Greenway is that we have so many repetitive customers because they don't feel guilty.
And it's interesting too. I was just thinking as you were saying that, I was thinking that a lot of places have these barbecue fanatics and people that come that from, like and you guys, those same people come to see you guys, but also too you have people that aren't like crazy about barbecue, but they just love your food and they come 3 or 4 times. Like it becomes like it's like that not donut shop that they love but it's just like something that it's just interesting.
No, it is that. It's this really unique relationship that we have with some of our customers. They do not know that we've ever been mentioned in Texas Monthly. They don't know that we participate in the barbecue festival or any of it. They come because they work on the second floor and they like awesome. And they know us and we love them and they love us. But it's so funny when they like sometimes we'll post if the Texas Monthly top 25 new barbecue joints. Yeah. We were so proud. So we posted that on a little placard and people were like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea. I've been eating with you guys 3 times a week." So it's nice to be loved for who we are. And there's a lot of people that eat with us every day because we do breakfast and lunch. So there's people we see every day because people are very habitual with how they handle breakfast. And
yes,
they're doing it not because they read anything. They're doing it because they like the food and they like the people that work for us. They like the guy that serves them their breakfast taco. And so there's a real genuine
I love that so much.
Yeah. I don't think you can get that outside of the business model that we have in an office complex. I mean, there's just something about serving people every day. I think coffee shops probably can relate. You get to really know the people and they get to really know us. So when we promote somebody from breakfast, because that's like our intro spot, like you join our team, you start at breakfast. When we promote them to lunch, the breakfast crowd are like, they're very protective. They're like, "What happened to Matt?" And they're like, "Oh, well, you'll see Matt later today. Matt's working lunch now." And it's really nice to see that.
And they probably get proud. They're probably proud of you when you get write-ups and things too. Going into this interview, there's so many things I've learned from this interview already. So thank you. But it's interesting. I didn't think about it in that sense because it's very unique what you guys have.
Yeah. And we really like the office complex model. Thought about it for a little bit. And then we were like, okay, there's 2 reasons why we don't want to do that. And one was we felt like not every office complex is Greenway Plaza. Like Greenway Plaza has really suited us very well because of its uniqueness, its location. We also felt like if we do a second food court, then we become food court barbecue. I mean, you can get away with 1, but can you get away with 2? We weren't really willing to take that risk because we really wanted to establish ourselves, legitimately as a place where you could come on a Saturday or Sunday. There's a lot of people that have a hard time visiting us because they work Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. They work and we're open. So we really wanted to be able to be open on Saturday and Sunday. And we, office complexes are limited in the sense that you're typically not open on the weekends. We decided to start looking above ground. And
is it physically, because I haven't been to your location, is it physically underground? Are you below the surface?
We call it's our subterranean barbecue.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So we're one level below ground in Greenway Plaza.
Oh, kind of reminds me of when I lived in Japan. Like there's like entire areas that are underground, like for food and buying things, and it feels weird when you realize like once you've come above ground, you're like, wow, I can't believe I was underground for that long time.
I know. Well, we joke because we never know how the weather is. I mean, you can tell if it's sunny or not sunny because there's less light coming in. But people will come in and they're just like drenched wet and we're like, "Oh, is it raining?" And then Patrick will laugh because, the elements are a big factor for pitmasters, right? Like you're loading briskets onto a smoker and it's just pouring rain, right? Like that'll affect you if it's windy, if it's cold, if it's hot, if it's humid. We are susceptible to none of those things.
So now you're jumping into something that you will be. So how did you find your new location and what can you tell me about the new location?
Well, when we were looking the first time, so about 3-4 years ago, we were really centered in Spring Branch, which is a neighborhood in Houston. I grew up in Spring Branch. We really like Spring Branches. It's very underserved. There's a huge residential population and it's just growing and exploding. But the restaurant and commercial growth here was always seemed to be very much lagging behind. And it's also very close to being in the loop, which if you're familiar with Houston, being in the loop is a very desirable thing to be. We're not in the loop. We are just outside of the loop. So we are like as close as you can get to the loop without being in the loop, which means the real estate's much more affordable. So our rent is very ideal. Nice. It means that we're taking on less risk. It means we have more parking. And we are surrounded by this residential community that we now live in. We actually recently bought a house in Spring Branch. So it's our community that we live in. And, you know, we just always felt like this was where we wanted to be. We had to pass on a location in the same shopping center because we looked at the location a week before I gave birth. And I had no idea what was in store for us. I thought, oh, this will be easy. I'll just put him in, you know, the baby carrier and carry my life, right? Like, I don't have to slow down. So we looked at this space 5 days before I was due. We fell in love with it. And they were like, well, we should start negotiating a lease. And the landlord sent us a lease. I gave birth and then had a nervous breakdown trying to negotiate a lease with like a 3-week-old baby. Oof. And I just remember looking at Patrick at one point and saying, like, it's a great location. The timing is not right. Like, no. I can't do this. Because shockingly, Patrick doesn't read the leases. Also running a business remotely for me. And I pulled the plug on this location. I was like, I can't do this right now. So we need to walk away from this. And so about 6 months later, the landlord happened to just be in our restaurant in line. We're like, hey, what are you doing here? And they said they just wanted to say hi. It was very serendipitous because later that day, an announcement came out about a friend of ours that had leased the space we were looking at. And we'd said, please go for it, because we didn't want another barbecue restaurant to come into Spring Branch. That's our dream. So this guy is a bar, you know, non-barbecue concept, signed a lease. That news came out. And then it was that same day that the landlord was eating with us. He kind of called later that day and was just like, are you guys ready? You know, is now a good time? We've got a great space in that same center. And the time was great. We felt like Greenway was going perfectly. Our son was in daycare. You know, we were back into full swing. And so we started negotiating with them on the end cap, which was a much bigger space.
That's cool.
Much more ideal for barbecue. And that's the lease that we signed. And, you know, it really, I think, proves that everything really does work out. I know people will want to punch me in the face when I say that, but the timing was great because the space is more ideal. The timing is more ideal.
Well, that's how life works.
We're 5,000 square foot restaurant. So.
Will you guys have offsets and the whole deal? Like, it's going to be different.
Well, we're going to have 2 J&R Oilers. We will probably work with some offsets. I know Patrick is having a mill scale built. He's been talking about doing that for a while.
That's so funny.
We want to continue doing the whole hog. So we'll have probably a Bewley or something that will facilitate the whole hog. But yeah, so a lot more versatility in our barbecue. And
the hours will be different too, right?
Yeah, so we'll be open for lunch and dinner, and obviously we'll be open on Saturday and Sunday, so we'll be able to finally serve you barbecue on the weekends. Yeah, we're excited. The menu will be similar but expanded, so we'll take Greenway. We'll have all of those things available, but we'll be able to do even more.
Will you be able to have alcohol at this location?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, alcohol. So we're going to do beer and wine. We're not doing booze. Mm-hmm. And the reason that we decided not to is we actually talked to a lot of our mentors. So we talked to Pat Martin, some, various people around the country that have multiple locations. And they all kind of came back and said, a majority of our sales were beer and wine. So we decided to just take out the booze and cut our costs because the liquor licenses can be pretty steep.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we decided, okay, well, if that's what the stats are showing, then we'll just do beer and wine. Wine's enough for me, so.
Yeah, no, then that's perfect. And then you could also, too, because of your background, kind of incorporate wine, because I've talked to a number of different people because I've always felt that wine works really well with barbecue. And when I was originally married, and and kind of when I was falling in love, we would go to Napa and go to like the Santa Rita Hills and like the different places in like Santa Barbara and Paso Robles, and I always felt like that would be a perfect compliment. She was a vegetarian, so she didn't really care.
She didn't understand.
She didn't get it, but I've always felt like.
Are you guys divorced now?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it because she's vegetarian?
No, it was like one of the many things, but it was actually, at first it wasn't. When you're in love, and I've never really talked about this, but you're actually interviewing me now, but when you're in love, you'll do anything, and you'll eat separate meals if you have to kind of like, we cook, and we love cooking, and it was like during the heyday of the Food Network, so we were so into it. And so, but after a while, once you start cooking separate meals a lot, it just becomes, and then you start to realize, there's other things that we're not driving on the same as, but the food, but I can get over like if there's anybody watching this that I'm actually going to marry someday, I can get over this. They're probably not watching. I don't think
you can eat it. You could take your future vegetarian girlfriend or wife to Feges BBQ.
Exactly.
There's so much vegetarian option. We came up with that concept before we opened in Greenway Plaza. We wanted to do a real wine-focused beverage menu, and then it didn't work out because we were, in a food court, and so we said, okay, we'll do it in the next concept, and so here we are, and I am so excited about the wine pairings. And we've done a couple pop-up events where we served composed dishes with wine pairings, and all of the composed dishes had a smoked element. It wasn't always a smoked meat, but it'd be like smoked beets or smoked short rib. And the pairings were my favorite part of that dinner. It was so fun coming up with them. And it's always surprising to people what pairs. So like, it's not always like the big, bold wine. I mean, it can be just, something with like just the right amount of acidity to cut through the fat. There's so many good wine
and
pairings.
There's white wines that work really well with barbecue that people wouldn't realize.
We did mostly white wines with this dinner. We did, it was like 5-6 courses. Only 2 of the courses had red wine.
That makes me so happy. Wow. Yeah. That makes me even more excited. Are you going to play with that then at the new location?
Oh yeah. So we're going to have some approachable, real straightforward wines because we're a neighborhood restaurant, but there will always be some slots on that wine list that are just dedicated to highlighting some more obscure wine regions. So one of the wines that we poured at the dinner is it's a Lisa Negro from Lanzarote in the Canary Islands. Carbonic maceration, so it's like super juicy and fruit forward. And it's a lighter style of wine grown in volcanic soil, like whole cluster. So it's just like really green too. It's like green and juicy. It's like blueberry juice that was crushed with stems. And it was a really, really great pairing for the smoked pork loin that we did. I'm excited stuff like, because you don't hear about the Canary Islands or wine from the Canary Islands very often. So I like the idea of being able to educate somebody with something they're going to enjoy.
Yeah, well, that's what I would hope people would want out of life, is to explore and learn and have that aha moment more than just once in their life. Yeah, that's awesome.
Exactly. And then if you're not in the mood for that, you can just get your Chardonnay, because we'll have that on the menu too.
or if you have to get an IPA, you can get if you have to go down that road and get something super hoppy that'll just mess everything up that you're eating. Yeah, go ahead. So is it going to be called Feges something else, or is it going to be called is it Feges, not Feges 2, because that sounds a little too.
It's Feges BBQ. This is, so people always ask us what is it like to work with your spouse, and 99% of the time it's great. Trying to decide on the name for our first restaurant was a big issue, and trying to decide on the name for our second restaurant was a big issue, because we were very opposed in our ideas and our rationales. So ultimately, because we could not agree, both of our locations are Feges BBQ.
Okay, that works. But it'll be
it took us a year to come back to it. It's like we started there, and then we spent a year, and then we kind of got back to it, and we're like, okay, we'll just call it Feges BBQ. Concept is very similar, so we felt like we could get away with it.
And it could be Feges Spring Branch if people are trying to refer to it like that's where I'll meet you or something.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of our our logo and everything is going to be identical, but the way we refer to it, views, and internally we call it Feges BBQ Spring Branch.
When do you think this will open?
February or March. We got a big build out ahead.
Is that fun to design the restaurant inside, like the interior of the restaurant?
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of fun. We're working on that part of the process right now. So just like the flow and where are we going to put the line, and we're going to have a glass enclosed smoke room. So the oilers will open up into the restaurant, but the body of the oiler is outside. So the chimney and the smoke box, like everything's outside. And it'll open up into this room that is enclosed in glass so that you can see the pit masters as they're pulling the briskets off, as they're seasoning the meat and putting it on. So you'll be able to kind of see that interactive barbecue process throughout the day. And so it's fun to design those elements. We're on a pretty tight budget, or according to our designer, we're on a pretty tight budget. They would love to have, all the money in the world to do all the cool things, but it's been kind of fun because we're forcing them to make the function of the space part of the design. So the smoke room, in my opinion, is a focal design point.
For sure.
It's also got to be there no matter what. So, we're really excited. Side seating, also like a play area for kids. It's going to be very kid friendly because our children will be raised there. So it was for the neighborhood, but it was also definitely something.
So that's also going to be interesting too, to juggle the two locations. It's going to be 2021 is going to be an interesting year for you guys.
It's been interesting since I met Patrick, but yes, 2021 will prove to be, I think, a very pivotal year for our business, for our family. There's going to be a lot going on, but we're really excited.
I thank you so much, and thank you for what you guys are doing, because I know that a lot of people, everyone that I talk to, if they always say go to Houston, they always say go to Feges, because it's so unique, and the food is so complimentary, and it's
Yeah.
I think you guys have put together something special, and also too, you guys are two really great humans, really nice people. So I'm glad. Like, I've loved talking to Patrick. I was watching the interview again 2 days ago just to kind of refresh, and I forgot how happy I was the whole time I talked to Patrick.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well, it means a lot to hear you say that. Thank you. We're really excited.